Okay, this is my second preach. This is quite niche. It's a gospel message that I would preach maybe into a group of marginalised women, maybe in a women's prison or in a women's domestic violence shelter or homeless shelter, something like that. So, karaoke. What do you think about karaoke? When it's suggested, do you jump up and can't wait to get to the microphone? You think it's the biggest fun ever. Maybe you do it with your family or your friends. Or is it something that makes you recoil in horror, makes you full of shame and embarrassment and you'd never want to do it? Well, I can tell you, it's not for me. When I was in primary school, when I was about 5 or 6, I went along to our singing class and I found out when I got there that there was going to be a singing exam. Oh my gosh, how embarrassing. I waited in line for all my friends to go, and then I had to take my place and sing a song in front of the class. A tiny, tiny little squeaky voice came out, and I dreaded my end of term report, which said, "Mary is not yet able to sing in tune." It's a horrifying memory, full of shame, and it silenced me for a long time. Those words left a shameful scar. I think our voice is a really vulnerable part of us, don't you? It's almost like a barometer of how we are as people, and when we can sing and shout, then we are in a place that's much freer than when our voice is really, really constrained by everything that has pushed us down. It can be hard for us to speak up. Women's voices have been suppressed all the way through history. Once, a couple of years ago, I went to a homelessness conference in London, and the chair of the conference was a man from the House of Lords. He was a black man, and his job was to take questions from all the people there after the speakers. And he said that he was not going to take any questions from white men, only from women and people of colour. Now, this is not something I'd ever come across before, and I thought it was a bit extreme, but I kind of liked it as well. And I found out afterwards that in a situation like that, if you ask women to speak up first, then other women will speak up, because they found their voice. It's almost like we have to have permission. Discrimination, violence, abuse and shame makes us lose our voice. And finding and speaking with your authentic voice is essential to being fully alive and connected and created, revealing who we really are and what we believe and value, but allowing ourselves to be fully seen in that way is quite vulnerable, isn't it? At this time of year, we sing carols, and for many of us it's the only time of year that we sing anything. And we know that story, don't we? And when we sing the carols and we remember the nativity plays. But hidden in the Christmas story is a story about a woman who found her voice because Jesus came into her life. And I want to tell you how we can also find our authentic voice when we encounter Jesus. I don't know what you think about Christmas. Maybe you think it's not relevant for today. It's just a story like a Christmas movie, or maybe just a fairy tale. Or how can it be relevant when we are living in such different times? There's a quote from a famous Christian author called G.K. Chesterton, and he says this about fairy tales. Fairy tales are more than true, not because they tell us dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten. And this story tells us that we can beat our dragons. I want to talk about Mary, the mother of Jesus. Most of you have heard of her, I'm sure. Maybe some of you have played her in a nativity play. If you had a Catholic upbringing, she's a really big deal, isn't she? But she's kind of painted as a meek and mild lady, quite quiet, saintly, inoffensive. However, that's really not how she was at all. And to give a bit of background on her, she lived in a time when her country was dominated and had been occupied by a brutal invader, the Romans. They were very cruel, and they taxed the people to poverty. She was really young, only about 15 or 16. About half of women died in childbirth or shortly after. She was powerless in society, as were all women. She was unmarried. She was brown, not white, and she was engaged to a man named Joseph. And what's more, she came from Nazareth. They said of Nazareth that nothing good came from there. Think of the worst tower block you can imagine, or the street that nobody will walk down, even in the daytime. Yeah, she came from that part of town. And a crazy thing happened to her. An angel appeared to her. Now, don't think like little cherubic angels like on cute Christmas cards. No, no. This was terrifying. It made her quake and fall to the ground. And the angel told her she would give birth to a baby by a miracle, and that baby would change the world forever. So now she's pregnant, unmarried, an unbelievable story. Who's going to believe that? She's full of shame. What will be the outcome when people see she's pregnant, she's not married? Will Joseph even keep her and marry her? She's confused and terrified, so she thinks, I'm going to take some time out. So she ran away. Have you done that? I've done that. Let's run away for a while. She ran to a family member called Elizabeth, who was also pregnant with a very important baby called John. When Mary got to Elizabeth's house, Elizabeth was at the sink washing up. There was soup bubbling on the hob. She had a really tiny house because she thought she would never have a baby. And in her living room was piles of all the stuff you buy when you're about to have a baby. There was a cot that her husband Zechariah had not yet put together. There was baby grows, piles of nappies, and a pram in the corner. The doorbell wasn't working. So Mary went in and said, "Hi, Elizabeth." But she's still full of shame and confusion. She doesn't know what reception she's going to get. She's tired, dusty, hungry. She could be thrown out even by Elizabeth when she finds out. She squeezes past the packages and Elizabeth comes rushing out from the kitchen. Her own baby, Elizabeth's baby, John, has leapt with joy inside of her. Elizabeth embraces Mary with excitement. And she says Mary is not shamed. She's accepted. She's not rejected. She's chosen. She's not poor, but rich. Not invisible, but fully seen. Not unfortunate, but privileged. Not soiled goods, but holy. Shame and trauma can silence us. Our words turn to ashes every time they try to leave our mouths. They start as a fire in the pit of our stomachs and come out like a puff of smoke. But not this time for Mary, because at last she had found her voice. And she believed in the Jesus that she was carrying, the one that would give her confidence and courage. And she could sing. Boy, could she sing. Mary had soul. And she didn't sing a soothing lullaby, but a voice to shatter shackles, thundering through time full of souls. Mary had soul, and she would have loved karaoke. And this is what she sang. Of course, we don't know the tune. Oh, how my soul praises the Lord, how my spirit rejoices in God my Saviour, for he took notice of his lowly servant girl, and from now on all generations will call me blessed. For the Mighty One is holy, and he has done great things for me. He shows mercy from generation to generation to all who fear him. His mighty arm has done tremendous things. He has scattered the proud and haughty ones, He has brought down princes from their thrones and exalted the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away with empty hands. He has helped his servant Israel and remembered to be merciful, for he made his promise to our ancestors, to Abraham and his children forever. She looked to God because she has been seen by him. It was immense. She knew she'd been recognised. And in the fear and shame, God had come down and changed everything. He had reached down from heaven and rearranged her life. He had squeezed her heart so hard that the joy sprayed out between his fingers. And she realised God had done this for all of humanity, not just her. She was just the first. He turned all rules on their heads. And he's a just God who puts the poor above the rich and looks for humble and lowly as he looked for her. The passage that I just read is a really, really famous passage. Christians have put it to music all the way through history. It's called the Magnificat. In fact, it's a really radical song, and at various times through history, it was actually banned from being read or preached about. Example, in India, when the British were brutal rulers. In Guatemala, during the Civil War, by the mothers of the children who had been disappeared by the Argentine government, and by poor serfs in the time of the Russian Tsars. It's only the first half that is ever sung about, not the second half that talks about the poor and the lowly and the powerless. A pastor called Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he's very famous. He stood up to the Nazis in the Second World War and was martyred for it. He was executed. He said this passage is the most passionate, the wildest, the most revolutionary hymn ever sung. This passage in a nutshell is what Jesus came to do for us. His presence in us, before us and around us, helps us find our voice. Thousands of years before Jesus was born, a man called Isaiah foretold the coming of Jesus and called him Emmanuel. Emmanuel means God with us in every situation, in every place, in every circumstance. He's still with us. I wonder if when you watch The Voice on TV, you think, I wonder which judge I would choose. And will a judge even turn around for me if I was there? If you don't know what The Voice is, you have 4 judges sitting with their backs to the singer so they only hear the voice. And when they decide to choose the singer for their team, they bang a button and they turn their chair around to see the singer. So which one would you choose? Well, of course I have a soft spot for Sir Tom Jones. Of course I do. He's a national treasure, isn't he? But reality, what would I choose? will.i.am, for sure, or maybe Paloma Faith, if she was there. But I can tell you this. We don't have to wait for God to press his button and turn around and choose us, to approve us. He's right here. He's Emmanuel. He's God with us. He has already pushed his button for you. So I invite you to choose him today. He is kind and fair and will give you chance after chance, because the baby grew into a man who was crucified and died for you and for me and for all of us forever, that we could know God and know God with us, Emmanuel forever, the God who helps us to speak, who gives us a voice, who gives us a life, who gives us hope.